last Friday, the Ogun State government signed a bill that will regulate open grazing and the establishment of cattle ranches into law. The bill was signed into law by the governor of the state, Prince Dr. Abeokuta, on Friday. And that came with a whole lot of excitement. Those who have been thinking about what we need to do, to this menace of open grazing in the land. But we're looking beyond that. We're looking at the economic opportunities that are involved in this for the state and for those who own these animals, who perhaps are earning big, from the business of cattle rearing. We have in the studio with us someone who is very, very deep in this area. He's been here a couple of times, and we have decided to bring him back again to explain to us the beauty of this new law in Ogun State. We have with us a professor of animal physiology, Professor OLUSEGUN. Professor OSINOWO, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you on this program this morning on a day like this. I don't know, what kind of excitement did you have on Friday when you heard that the bill has been signed to law, finally by the Ogun State governor?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I was really excited. I think it's a win for the state, especially the arable crop farmers, who for several years have voiced their opinion about that matter. The fact that they were no longer secure on their farmlands, and there was serious security threats to the extent that farmers were and this was beginning to affect food prices. It shows that the state government is a responsive one, ready to listen to the cries of its people. And the law, the anti-open grazing law, is very timely, I would say. And if well implemented, certainly that would be one progress.
How should it be implemented? Because that's already there are fears of implementation. There are fears of the headsmen, attacking government. In fact, in the news this morning, some of them are in some parts of Nigeria. They say they're going to take the governors to the courts and all of that. Now, for us in Ogun State, what are the things that we need to put, together fundamentally for the implementation of this new law?
Actually, it's good that those who are opposed to the law are threatening to go to court. They should have done that earlier. And there is no fear about that. Courts are there to resolve disputes between parties. So wait and see the outcome if they decide to take that step. The passage of the signing of the anti-open grazing law for it to come into effect, even though it's been given a 6-month grace period by the government, which to me shows the magnanimity and generosity of the state government to allow a transition period, even though 6 months is not that long. And it just shows it's a caring government. The implementation of the law, however, is another kettle of fish. There is no doubt that there are enough provisions in that law to ensure that it is well implemented. For instance, as announced by the governor, I think a committee is being set up headed by the Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture, who is going to oversee the implementation. That's one aspect of it. Because there are things for government to do, and there are things for the private sector to do. Also, we see that the state government is already taking the right steps But I kind of think that a lot of the work has to do with the private sector, and the role of government is just regulation.
Okay, Prof, we'll just take this quick break, sorry. We just want to take this short breather and come back shortly. We are looking at the Ogun State anti-open grazing and cattle ranches establishment law, and we have in studio Professor OLUSEGUN. Stay with us.
Do you own a small piece of land or a large one? If yes, then get started by growing vegetables, fruits, anything that you can cultivate, harvest, and possibly make money from. We all need to get back to the farm, small scale, mechanized, you name it. Farming, the preferred way to go. Taking full advantage of this endowment.
All right, well, thank you so much for watching us, and we are looking at the Ogun State anti-open grazing and cattle ranches establishment law. We are looking at its implementation and the prospects, the economic benefits, social benefits this new law will bring to the state. We have in the studio Professor OLUSEGUN, a professor of animal physiology. Prof, you were talking about implementation, and you spoke about the fact that a committee is in place already.
Yes, headed by the Honorable Commissioner. But I would like to appeal that we look at the implementation of this law from the perspective of what the state stands to gain.
Okay.
Obviously, we are not a major cattle producing state as of now. But the passage of this law is opening an opportunity for people to come into cattle ranching and run the business in a modern way. And as others have discovered before indigenes of the state, cattle production in this state can be very lucrative because the weather is favorable, the soil is favorable, the markets are here. So in looking at the cattle production issue, we should look at it from the perspective of the cattle value chain.
Okay.
Okay.
The cattle value chain is actually very deep, and if modernized and sustained, it can be a cash cow for the state. It involves not just the production. Even if we look at the production aspect alone, there are so many aspects to it. It goes beyond just acquisition of land and stock to keep. Whoever is going to start a ranch needs inputs, massive inputs. Inputs like fencing materials. We're lucky in Ogun State, we have factories that produce these materials in Agbara. So it's an opportunity for such companies to capitalize and expand. Apart from that, there's the issue of cattle feed. Because now the cattle is going to be confined. And we have a 3 to 4 months dry season in this state. So it opens the visa for introduction of cattle feed, especially as supplements in the dry season. And that's going to impact not just on those who are producing conserved forages like hay and silage. It's also going to impact on our crop farmers because they have residues that are useful in cattle feeding. For instance, dry cassava peels is a major dry season feed resource for cattle. And they're going to make a lot of money selling dry cassava peels. Also, we have the veterinary services, provision of drugs, health management of stock, cattle vaccinations, and so on, even up to meat inspection. All these are veterinary services that will benefit. Also, even the supply of the cattle, because as you know, it will take time for the state to be self-sufficient in cattle production. That means we need to establish 3 types of cattle markets. We need international cattle markets because as of now anyway, most of the cattle we consume in Nigeria are coming from foreign countries like Niger, as far as Central African Republic, Sudan, Burkina Faso. It's unbelievable. When you visit the international cattle markets, like the one in Mobi, you see stores by countries, and you see all these foreign cattle, and it's big business. So, since it's no longer allowed to bring animals on hoof into the state, that means we must have entry points where people can buy the cattle, the trade cattle. So we need, especially at the northern borders of the state, we need those markets. Then we need the secondary markets and the tertiary markets. The big markets where smaller towns, butchers in smaller towns can come to buy their animals. Also, it's going to have an impact on livestock transportation. You can no longer bring animals on hoofs. So you need different types of transportation. For mass movement, you probably need railway wagons like we used to have in the 60s and 70s. We need to have articulated trucks that will move cattle in bulk. Like if you're moving 50 heads now, you can't use a pickup. But then when you're moving 1 or 2 cows between the small markets and the local abattoir, then you can use these pickups and that are so ubiquitous and are already being used for that. So it's going to have an impact on transportation because you want to move cattle, that's how you've got to move it. Then we look at the products. There are so many, apart from red meats, fresh meat, that way of disposing the meat has to be deepened. We need cold storage to keep carcasses. We need meat shops. It's not hygienic, it's not nice to have to go to market and see how our butchers dispose of the meat. The conditions are not hygienic. Even transporting the meat from the abattoir to the market is a sorry sight.
Well, okay, talking about this particular law, and yes, a lot of persons have also said that the reason we might be having resistance from the people that are actually practicing open grazing right now is largely because they are not well educated or sensitized as to the benefit that comes with grazing and with ranching. And I just want you to tell us which is healthier for the cow, for the cattle rather, and of course how we can, in the transition process, how we can also include sensitization as to the people that are going to practice, get into the new business of ranching, and of course those that are leaving open grazing into that form. So I want you to tell us a bit about that too.
Yes, open grazing is good, is being banned because it's not only in the area of security that it is not ideal. Movement of cattle randomly across the land spreads cattle diseases. It's more difficult to control. It's better cattle are reared in confined spaces like on ranches and cattle feedlots. By the way, it's not, there are three types of operations we're looking at here. There are the cattle ranches, where you need a large expanse of land. Then we have the cattle feedlots, where you don't really need so much land and you can raise a large number of animals in a small area. And then you have the dairy operations, the dairy farms, where milk is produced. We need all the three types. And as we develop, even these have to further specialize. But for now, I think we need the minimum types we need are those three types: the cattle ranch, the dairy farm, and the cattle feedlot. The purpose of the cattle feedlot is to take cattle from the market or from producers and fatten them for the market, young animals or animals that are emaciated. There's what you call compensatory growth. When you take them and you feed them well for about 100 to 120 days, they put on a lot of flesh. So when they come to the market, the yield is much higher. So, as I was saying, it's going to need a lot of planning on the part of the government, not just government, but government in facilitating the access to resources needed by prospective ranchers and operators within the value chain. If it's such a lucrative business that once it's established, the running costs are low. It's the establishment costs that are very high. And we need to get it right. And my own feeling on this is that in this state we're so lucky, we have virtually thousands of young people who are very well versed in livestock production generally. We have animal science graduates, we have veterinary graduates, we have products from the monotechnics like the animal health colleges and so on, who know exactly what to do, but maybe they are incapacitated by lack of resources. So if these people, if the state can take the step in identifying, providing a modicum of training and empowering this cadre of citizens, I think I can say the future will be bright.
The argument for open grazing, I sat down with some young men someday, and they spoke about species of cattle. They say some species of cattle don't survive when they are confined, that they can only survive when they openly graze. Is that correct, Prof?
That is not correct. Maybe what they are confusing is the fact that the Fulani type cattle, except one, the breeds, the home breeds, most of them are not suitable for cattle ranching because they come with long horns, long legs that are of no value in a cattle ranch or feedlot. If you look at the advanced countries, you find that most of the cattle they use in ranching for beef production in cattle feedlots, they're either short horns or hornless. Okay? So, because you need a lot of control, like when you want to weigh animals, you have to pass them through a chute or you want to treat them. Those long horns are hindrances. Besides, they don't add value in terms of beef.
So what do you do to the long horns?
Good. That takes us to the issue of byproducts. It's not only the meat that provides a source of revenue in beef production. You have byproducts that are also very valuable. For instance, hoofs and horns are used in the production of glue. So it's an industrial raw material. And bones, you have bone meal. They're used in production of bone meal For instance, in feeding not just ruminants like cattle, sheep, and goats, but also poultry and so on. And then you have their blood. In a standard abattoir, the blood is collected and dried to produce blood meal, which is also a component in poultry feeds. So whichever way you look, you find that beyond the meat, beyond the beef, there are other byproducts. Then you have the hides that are used in the leather industry. That's another useful byproduct. So all these niches need their own value chain to support them.
Okay, Prof, when you look at the position of the southern governors, I think this is just a way to solve the problem of insecurity, and which of course you've also alluded to. And some people would say that yes, that's very interesting, and with what you have seen so far, with the governors of the different states, embracing, the ban, embracing ranching as a form of rearing cattle, and of course disbanning open grazing. Do you see that it is something that is achievable, especially because some will say it's a political policy, and of course with what you have experienced and what you've seen so far, do you see it's something that they are really serious about, to the point that they will look at the intricacies that you've talked about, the structures they need to put in place? Do you see that as something that will come to life?
Well, let me say right away that it's not just the southern governors that are against open grazing. Since 1964, when the first grazing reserve was established in Katsina State, there was no Katsina then, so it used to be Kaduna State, at Runka. Even the federal government has been making efforts to settle the nomadic Fulani. And a lot of resources, a lot of land was gazetted in the past for use as grazing reserve. And the objective of setting up those grazing reserves was to encourage the cattle Fulani to settle. But there are social and anthropological issues which people tend to overlook. To them, it's beyond cattle production. It's a lifestyle, it's a culture, which they are reluctant, understandably, to let go. Even though we admit that it doesn't make sense to be roaming about cattle, they keep saying, provide us with the land, provide us with resources. I think the argument is not about the desirability of ranching. It's about providing the resources to enable it. So, and they know all these things. I'm talking of the cattle Fulani. They know. One can understand their position, but the negative aspects of open grazing, there are so many. We've talked about security, we've talked about spread of diseases, but if we look at the human angle, those children are not going to school. If we're not careful, the banditry of 20 years to come is going to be worse than what we have now. They are prone to drug addiction. Even the NDLEA boss acknowledges that. You go into the forest where these people graze cattle, you see syringes, you see all kinds of dangerous drugs. And it's good that attention is being diverted to. It's not fair. It's not fair at all.
Prof, there used to be open grazing. It's been like that for years in Nigeria. Now, why has it been polluted or diluted? Is that the difference? Because it's not really been dangerous. Because you also alluded to the fact that this has been happening for long. But I think it's in recent times that a lot of things are actually coming out of it, because in the real sense of it, it may not really be dangerous, open grazing, if you're just grazing your animals and you're not straying into other people's farms, and you're not attacking anybody, so it could just be a harmless venture. But now that it has become harmful.
Harmless in the sense that we're not taking into consideration the spread of diseases.
Okay.
But even if we discount that,
what kind of diseases are they spreading, or are they likely to spread? If we have to look into that too.
okay, I'll just give a simple example which everyone can relate with. Ordinary worms. You know, as they are grazing, they are also defecating. And that's a primary source of contamination of an entire area with worms. That's even a simple one. But there are other issues. In the past, why, and by saying the past, maybe 50, 60 years ago, there were not so many. The grazing of cattle in the south was not so common because we still had most of our forests intact.
Yes.
We had the problem of tsetse fly infestation. Tsetse fly was spreading a cattle disease called trypanosomiasis, or trypanosomosis as they call it nowadays, which made it dangerous for the cattle to graze in the south. But with the opening of the forest, clearing of the trees, it's no longer an issue. So they could move down. So we can say that's the pull factor. The push factor is the desertification of the Sahel region. The Sahel region of West Africa is getting drier due to climate change, due to overgrazing, due to increasing urbanization. And that is pushing the cattle, Fulani, down southwards in pursuit of pastures for their cattle. The third reason is there's increasing realization that the major market for the cattle business is southern Nigeria, Port Harcourt, Lagos, Enugu, Ibadan. So there's that incentive to be closer to the market. So many different reasons why we are feeling the effect more now.
Okay, yes. Let's also look at, from the analysis you've talked about, the fact that it largely consumed in the south, and of course encouraging the younger population that are unemployed into tapping into this kind of a thing to get them understand that they can do it better. So how do you think we can go about this? How do you think we can encourage the younger ones or new persons to come into the process of rearing cattle, and of course doing that using a ranch or ranches, the provided ones or the ones that would be provided by, like you said, corporate, okay. Private to also come in this case?
Coming home to Ogun State, there are low-hanging fruits the state government can capitalize on. For instance, there is between 10 and 50,000 hectares of land in Mekwafon area, originally intended for establishment of grazing reserve. There are other places with smaller land areas, like Atimashai, where I think maybe they have about 1,200 hectares or so. These areas can be provided for young graduates that are interested in ranching. It could be depending on the kind of operation they want to run. It could be in 10 hectare. Even 5 hectare lots are okay for cattle feed lots. 10 hectare lots are okay for dairy farming. Even 50 hectare plots can readily sustain a cattle ranch of a small to medium scale. So as is being done in Oyo State, which I'm aware of, in Oyo State, graduate farmers, young graduates are being encouraged to take up land offered by government, maybe on long leases, as much as 1,000 hectares to these young graduates. And what are they doing there? They're doing arable crop farming. Some of them are doing cattle ranching. So that's one. Another one is there are still areas within the state where land is available, either family land or whatever, that can be given out on leasehold to these young farmers with minimum training, they will be able to operate. And it will encourage other components of the value chain to come in place. Because the moment you want to establish a ranch, as I mentioned earlier, you have the requirement for fencing materials, that's there. You have the requirement for pasture seeds. So some people have to specialize in pasture seed production so that the ranchers can establish their ranches. I talked about transportation. They don't all have to be in production. We look at the value chain, there are the input supply aspects, even up to fertilizer supply, because when you establish your pasture, you have to apply the fertilizer. So, and then there will be others whose only duty is probably to produce supplementary feeds for dry season feeding, using those materials that are locally available, and so on and so forth. And Ogun State is becoming an industrial hub. There are so many companies now that are generating waste products that are useful for livestock production. So all this can go to inform the deepening of the cattle value chain. Not even to talk about you remember about 10, 15 years ago, meat shops were becoming popular in Abeokuta here. I think it probably went out of fashion because of the lack of power supply. Because you need cold storage when you're talking about preservation of meat. And it's not just selling of raw meat. When you look at the consumption end of the value chain, all these bookers, restaurants, hotels, schools, they're all end users of
eateries.
Yes, eateries. Yes. So there is a lot of prospect which the state government can tap into, and encouraging. Why I'm stressing the issue of youth is that we're in this for the long term.
Yes.
Yes. And it will solve some other problems.
Yeah,
you've talked about the international market and of course how we get our cattle, our cows, you know, the ones that they feed and of course reproduce more of that. In Ogun State, for example, in Ipokia local government side, I am familiar with the local ones, and the local breeds of cows and what they do with that at that region. And when it's time for parties, you get to see them standing. And that's specific. Can the government also tap into something of that nature to maximize the potentials that we have in the industry?
In fact, let me just say that you touched on a very important aspect. Ogun State has an indigenous cattle producing population in those areas you mentioned. Incidentally, before the jihad in Nigeria, that was the type of cattle that was predominant in Nigeria. It was everywhere. But now they've been declared an endangered breed by the FAO. Their numbers are decreasing, but they are still there. In areas like Ipokia, Idiroko, Adodo, even up to Badagry in Lagos and Benin Republic, you find this type of cattle. And they are also in eastern Nigeria, and they spread along the coast. The Muturu cattle. I can tell you one thing. Whoever tastes Muturu beef will probably not touch Fulani cattle again. Because it's more juicy, it tastes better, and actually those cattle, even though they look small, they cost more.
Exactly.
They are more expensive. And they have other utilities, like they are used in ceremonies.
Yes.
You want to pay dowry, it's more prestigious, and so on. And from my own experience, because that's the type of cattle I keep, they are more amenable to ranching. To start with, they are short horns. Number two, they grow fast. Within 2 years, they reach market weight, if they are well fed. The way they are being kept now, in those areas I mentioned, they don't pose any threat to farmers because they are tethered. But of course, in a ranch where you have fencing, you don't need to tether them. When they are free to move around, they grow fast. The only thing is they stop growing earlier. But if you look at productivity on the basis of kilogram beef per hectare, you'll be shocked to find that they're actually more productive.
Okay, Prof. Yeah, I've been thinking about it. Confined grazing, I mean ranching, grazing reserve, they are not always covered. They are not insulated from the rains and the sun. Yeah. Why is that? Are the animals strong enough to take all of that?
Cattle are. You don't need any cover for cattle.
So
there are when you are doing ranching, the animals are on the pasture 24/7, daytime, nighttime, rainy time, they are there. And they are well protected. That's why they have a tough coat.
Okay.
Yes. So they are okay. But if you are doing feedlot, there are two types again. It can be open, or if their number is not much, you can raise them under shelter.
Okay.
But they all have their pros and cons. Okay. It's less labor intensive when it's done open, in open air. But when it's dairy farming, of course, you need a milking parlor.
Okay, Prof, you have really expanded this topic, and it's really giving me a lot of worries. I thought that the excitement is just about the fact that the state government has signed the anti-open grazing and cattle ranches establishment law. Okay. But from the way you have analyzed this, there is so much work to do. But the benefits are obvious. Yeah. Dry cassava, those who are in that business will be smiling to the banks. In the long run, veterinary services will improve. Transportation too, will also become very, very important. Given the number of cattle that we have in the state, you have an idea of the number of cattle we have in the state? That's difficult.
Not really, because now we have to discount the trade cattle coming in.
Yes.
Okay.
Like I mentioned earlier, most of the beef we consume in southern Nigeria, not just Ogun State, is coming from even outside Nigeria. But what is coming in from the north, from the Nigerian cattle Fulani, is still far more than what we produce in the south generally.
Okay.
But what we are saying is that our environment, we have now found out, is more conducive to the production of these animals. That's why people are migrating to this zone.
Okay.
You see? We have not talked about who is going to run the ranches.
Exactly.
We're only discussing how the ranches will be operated.
Okay.
So, if the cattle Fulani can have access to land and establish ranches, why not? There is no, the law doesn't
I don't think the state government has always been coming with open arms.
Of course.
Yeah, coming. I don't think that's, it hasn't been the conflict, the issue over the years.
Yes.
It's not about whether you're Fulani or, we know that we have a whole lot of Ogun State indigents who are also in this business. Now, quickly as we're closing, Prof, now, without really preempting or suggesting that the committee has a tough one on their hands, I see this as a very tough job. The way you have broken it down, it comes with a whole lot of layers. So, 6 months, you think is enough to set this on the right path, or you think it's the state government needs more time, to actually make this work? You sound too foreign, Prof.
No, 6 months is okay. The objective of this, I understand where the government is coming from. It's just to sensitize everybody that, look, we're not after you.
Yeah.
You have 6 months to think of a way out. I think that's all he has said. Okay. And one thing that I want to stress is that the 6 months is to enable operators within the value chain It's not just those who are raising the cattle. It's the supply chain, the marketing system, the processing, the transportation. Everybody is sensitized, and they can mobilize within those 6 months to.
So with what you've said, you know, you described a whole lot of resources needed, you know, to make this come to reality and all of that. So how do we encourage private investors to tap into all of the chains that you have described?
Okay, let me give one example. Lagos State government some years ago was interested in rice, provision of rice for its citizens. What did it do? It went to Kebbi State, talked with the government talked to its farmers, and they produced the rice at an agreed price. And it was taken to Lagos. The farmers are happy, Lagos State is happy. So I even see this beyond Ogun State. We can produce conserved forages or livestock feeds and ship to the north. What's the problem? And when they produce the cattle, they can ship the meat to us.
Collaboration.
Collaboration. We need each other. So that's
what does this also suggest for the Southwest? We have John Commission, Development Agenda for Western Nigeria. Can't the Southwest also collaborate, you know, on this issue?
Incidentally, about 3 months ago, a proposal was sent to Joint Commission and all the Southwestern states about looking ahead, long before the Southern governors took the decision to ban open grazing, that they should start thinking ahead about, look, 50 years ago during our lowest time, we had ranches all over the Southwest, more than 25 ranches. And some of them were really large, like at Upper Ogun Estate, where they were raising in Dama cattle. Even in Odeda here, we used to see some brown-looking cattle in Dama. But all those collapsed. We had the Agege Dairy, we had the Woro Dairy, and all these things. They were all there. The only mistake government made then was that those ranches were run by government. That's why I think that's why they collapsed. If they were run by private people, like was done in the poultry industry, most people don't remember that it was also that government that popularized the raising of poultry through the farm settlement scheme. If I still remember when it started, they used to buy eggs on the roadside, nobody to buy. We were not used to eating eggs when it was first introduced. But see what's happening now. Poultry is big business because government involvement is minimal. They should just promote it and leave the private sector to do it. I think it will be okay.
Fantastic. We must thank you so much for coming on this program, Professor OLUSEGUN, Professor of Animal Physiology, and I should add, Mr. Ranching, for coming on this program. Thank you so much for your enlightenment. It's been so edifying having Prof join us anytime we talk grazing, ranching, cattle business. Prof is always hands-on. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll take this break, and when we come back, we'll discuss another issue. Stay with us.
I need the police that can respond to emergencies first.
I want the equipment I need to do my job.
I want a police that won't harass or arrest me for no just reason.
I want to be valued for my work, not feared by honest people.
I want a police that won't ask me anything for the boys.
I want a decent salary that is paid on time.
With good laws,
Proper funding.
training,
And cooperation.
if it happens.
If it happens.
If it happens.
Peddling unfounded rumor on farmers and herdsmen, misinforming others, spreading fake news are all ill wind that blows no one any good. We all stand to gain nothing from causing disaffection among ourselves. North, south, east or west, we are all Nigerians and we must all live in peace and harmony. Let us stop spreading unfounded rumors. Let us give peace a chance in Ogun State. Well, for the past few days, the issue of International Day for Older Persons has been in the front burner globally. Here in Nigeria, it is not an exception, and here at Ogtv, we are also been doing a whole lot of issues on that. On Friday, we had some people who were on this program to talk about older people in the society, what we need to actually make life very comfortable for them. This morning, we are moving on with that in that trajectory, and we have joining us in the studio this morning two gentlemen to look at this issue, building sustainable welfare system for older people in the society. On my immediate right is Mr. Elijah Andrew Akinyemi. Is a board chair of New Dawn for Disability Rights Initiative, NDDRI, and is also a member of Cross-Roping Coalition of Societies for the Rights of Older Persons in Nigeria. Good morning, Mr. Elijah.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you here. We also have with us Mr. Gospel Onunka. He's also a member of Cross-Roping, and he's actually with the Neuropsychiatric Hospital here in Abeokuta. He's Assistant Director, Nursing Clinical Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Abeokuta. He's a member of Cross-Roping. He's also with us on the program. Mr. Onunka, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Yeah,
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, let's start with Mr. Elijah. This year's celebration for the older people, well, really targeted at a particular issue, and that's creating bigger platform for older people in terms of their involvement in internet and stuff like that. But it's a much bigger issue. Can you tell us how it's gone so far for Nigeria in terms of building sustainable system of welfare services for people that are old in this country?
Thank you very much. The theme this year is digital equity for all, like you rightly pointed out. When we talk of provision of welfare services for the older persons in Nigeria, I think it's at a very low ebb, which needs to be improved. There are so many things which ought to be provided for the elderly that are missing. In the area of accessibility to the environment, we hardly have it. In the area of transportation, it is almost unavailable. And the way older people are treated in our country, it deserves a change. So really, we need to improve on what we do for the elderly, because whether we like it or not, it is our prayer that one day we all shall grow old. and nobody wants to be treated like a second-class citizen.
Mr. Onuka?
Yes.
Yeah, for you, do you agree with him that it's at a low ebb, or that maybe you have some points of disagreement with Mr. Elijah?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. To start with, you young people in the studio, I have to remind you one thing.
We are old. I'm old.
The younger person.
The youngest person. I mean, all of you. I just have to remind you that status, elderly, awaits all of us.
Yes.
One day, you'll be regarded as an elderly person in the society. So I quite agree with him, sincerely. You see, that was why the United Nations theme for this year is this digital equality for all ages. You can see that it cannot even be overemphasized that the elderly, they are left behind in so many things in the society.
Okay, it's interesting that the day is here. It was October 1st, the same day we're celebrating Nigeria. Nigeria is also an older person. So when he talked about the challenges, said the society should treat elderly people better than they do, or that we do right now. And you look at the place of our culture, the Yoruba culture would emphasize on the need for you to respect the elderly and, of course, to assist them at different stages of growth and all of that. So do you see a connection with that kind of challenge right now, that people are not really passing on that kind of culture down to the younger one, which is affecting the way we treat the older people in our society?
Thank you very much. Thank you for even saying that. You can see that these days that the values are gone. The values which you have just said, part of them, respecting the elderly. These days the values are gone. People don't even respect the elders. I remember when we were growing up in the 60s, when you see an elderly person, you will respect the elderly person. Possibly like people like us, that we use locomotive trains in my own part of Nigeria. When we are seated down inside the train, when we see an elderly person coming in, we will get up. We have got that respect. In fact, but these days, it's not the same ball game. You see, the emphasis is more on money. You see people making money, and they are well celebrated. You see an elderly person with wisdom is not being celebrated in society. So the values are almost gone in Nigeria. Okay, not even in Nigeria.
Who do you blame really? The young ones or government?
Well, you see, if you are to blame, you blame the government that are there. The young ones are there as well. And thank God for this kind of opportunity that you gave us now. This is an opportunity for you, the media people, to talk to the young ones, talk to the government.
Okay, talking about the young ones, like I said, I belong in that category. And of course, we would like to also express how we feel, about the older persons, and of course, how we can, make sure the things that we're experiencing right now, or they are experiencing right now, is better handled. He also mentioned something earlier, which is very related to the issue of how we can move from where we are to where we need to be. The government, like he said, and you also said the young ones, to blame. How do we get to a point where you also know that it is only what the young ones have that they can give? You don't give us those values. You don't emphasize more on that, and you are growing older, and then it is what you have passed on to us that you definitely expect us to practice at some point. Is there a connection between what we're experiencing right now with what the elderly has actually passed down onto the younger ones to be able to do do I say the culture of it, the culture of encouraging the older ones, and the culture of supporting them at different stages? I want Mr. Elisha to answer that particular one. Is there a relationship between what you pass down to us whether you passed it down really well, just so we could take it up from where you left it.
Yeah, indeed, you are correct. But then, where the problem lies is what we call civilization. Things continue to change from time to time, and when you look at our socioeconomic values and our style of education, you see that all these are what is affecting the relationship between the older and the elderly. In the past, I think it was mentioned that respect was begotten to people who are older, but then that still exists even till today. But in those days, you know, the economic train of the country was more agrarian, whereby, you know, the elderly ones need the younger ones to work with them, vice versa. So, and then the community was, you know, was well streamlined, with the elderly, you know, taking full control. But with this rural-urban drift, things changed quite a lot. In the agrarian society, it is what you do. Your sweat brings you your food. But in the urban center, it's industrialization. Where in the village you have all the space for yourself, in the urban center you have to limit yourself. Unfortunately, enough policies were not made in the past to accommodate people after they grow old. Thus, we are now having the pinch of, you know, the lack of these policies today, whereby older people are not given their place in society. Then also, the older people are not advocating enough for themselves. People accept the fact that this is who I am, and I think it's a general pattern in the Nigerian society. Even if you feel, you know, you are subjugated, we are trained not to you know, speak, and thus, you know, people feel this is the way it should be, and unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the young person of today in 30 years will be an elderly person, and so the suffering continues.
So how do we encourage the policy direction that you mentioned for government, because it's the responsibility of the government to make policies to show direction? And yes, the younger ones will still accuse the older one of not leaving political offices for them, or they are still occupying these seats of powers. And so because of that, we still believe that everything you really need to change when it comes to the policies and how to take proper care of the elderly ones still lies in the hands of the older people that are in government at different stages. So what do we do at this stage? How do we encourage them to do the needful, just so they will also have a protected future, if that is not too far?
Well, what we can do are very many. You and me, I would call government. There is nothing government if you and me are not ready to change. For the elderly, I think, you know, the day you start your employment, assume it is that day you are retiring. Plan for a nice future. I tell people, your children will be distant from you if they feel that you are going to depend on them. But if you are sustainable and you can even, you know, push them forward, they'll come to you. So for the young people, do not see yourself as too young. Assume you are an old person. Make provisions for your future in any circumstance you find yourself, because the economy is going to continually change. And if you wait on government to do anything for you, then one is apt to suffer. And it is only when your child is sustainable and viable enough that is the only time such a child can take care of you. So we need to get more advocacy going. We need to be more concise. Let us learn how to treat young people nicely.